and welcome back to TCM Howzat. And it has been a while, I think it's fair to say, for a weekly cricket show. But we are back, and we're better than ever before. And we're here for summer. And joining me is Rob Rush, journalist, commentator, and Durham media man. Can I put that in? And alongside him is Harrison Burridge, England under-60s mascot.
Under-60s?
Under-60s?
Over 60s.
Over 60s.
I'm getting cancelled. Oh, this is fantastic.
Fantastic. It's good to be back.
Just because you also tweeted out that all five of us were going to be on this Howzat, and we've now just dropped to 3.
I mean, if that doesn't sum us up, I don't know what does. This has been a shambles. Get ready for more shambolic content for the next however long we're here for. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the Vitality Blast 2023, as well as reflecting on the first few rounds of the county championship. But first, there is one big story of the week, and that is, do you smell that in the air? It's Ashes fever. Yes, we are less than 1 month away from the start of the biggest test series in the world, and England have named their squad for the summer. It is Ben Stokes, James Anderson, Johnny Bairstow, Stuart Broad, Harry Brook, Zach Crawley, Ben Duckett, Dan Lawrence, Jack Leach, Ollie Pope, Matthew Potts, Ollie Robinson, Joe Root, Chris Wokes, and Mark Wood. There we go. That's a mouthful, isn't it? Right. Obviously, that's the squad for Ireland. Harrison, looking at that squad, bring you in on this. Is it an Ashes winning squad?
Definitely. I think, especially when you look at any England squad from the past year and you look at kind of a similar core, bar 1 or 2 names, which I'm sure we'll come on to, but it's definitely a squad that can take down the Aussies and bring back the Ashes to where they should be owned.
Fighting talk. I'm much more pessimistic, but I'm sure we'll get into that
Shock.
later. No Jofra Archer is a big headline from that squad, out with elbow fracture, a big blow. Rob, this has been a long-standing thing for him now. You've got a feel for him. My question to you would be, do you think we'll ever see him play Test cricket for England again?
No. Unfortunately, I think as something we'll get onto later on in the episode, with the whole rumours of franchise contracts coming into play where ACB would have to request release of the players to play for England. I think Jofra's 28 now. He's always been a better white ball bowler than a red ball bowler. He's had this is going to be his third straight summer of missing cricket due to injury. Professional sport is a short enough career as it is. If you're lucky, you get 15 years at the top. The guy's had 3 straight years of missing out. I think he really has to look for himself now, and obviously he'll make whatever choices he has to make, but I can't see a world where he plays Test cricket for England ever again, unfortunately. It wouldn't make sense to the bowlers we have coming through who have proven they can be more reliable. To him, we don't even know if he can bowl at 100% of what he was before all these injuries started packing up. And when you look at, you can maybe attribute some of these injuries to him being bowled into the ground at Test level. So why would he want to carry on playing it when you can, in white ball, you're limited in overs, so you can protect your body better, you can earn more money for it. From an outsider point of view, it kind of is a no-brainer for Joff to kind of go white ball only. I feel for him massively because, he was working so hard to get back. He'd said that he wanted to play in the Ashes, which I think is a huge thing. It wasn't the media saying, "Oh, can Joff come back?" He wanted to be back for this, and then to get ruled out on the eve is such a huge blow. And you kind of seen that Mark Wood is another one who's now having to come in just for an express pace option because England don't really have another quick bowler to go to. And even then, he's injury prone and has not played a lot of red ball cricket recently either. So I doubt he'll even get one game in before the Ashes starts. So yeah, terribly gutting situation for Jofra and for fans. There's nothing much better than seeing him storming at 95 mile an hour. But I don't see a world where he's playing Test cricket ever again.
And we will definitely miss him. We'll delve more into Jofra Archer a little bit later in the episode. You've touched there on some of the issues that we may come back to. Let's focus on the England squad though, and the big talking point. Get ready, grab your popcorn, because we are talking about Ben Folkes's omission. Johnny Bairstow has come back in. Harrison, I want to start by posing you a question, which is, if Bairstow and Folkes were both in the test side last year, why can't they both be in it this year?
The answer to that is the arrival of Harry Brook. I think what we've seen from him in the last few months in England's shirt on the test arena has been simply superb. He's made that spot his own since Bairstow came in, and it's Rob Key put it earlier the week, when you individually compare Bairstow and Folkes, they're only ever going to pick one player with the team and the philosophy they're going to build. But it is simply the arrival of Harry Brook. He was not in the picture per se this time last year, but his form has pushed him right into it, and he's now a definite starter for England.
And Rob, is that fair? Is that fair on Ben Folkes, who was instrumental, I think? I don't think he's done anything wrong to warrant his dropping. What's your thoughts on the situation?
It's very harsh. As you said, Folkes has done nothing wrong to be dropped. But as Harrison alluded to there, Key has made it clear they're only going to go with one. You can't drop Brook, you can't drop Root, you can't drop Pope, you can't drop Stokes. And it's kind of been one of the worst kept secrets, is that, Bairstow asked whether you believe that or not, because Yorkshire then came out and denied it. Whether he asked to keep or not, there's definitely been the ECB have been involved in that decision to have him keep for Yorkshire when coming back. The only alternative, which we'll probably get onto in the very next segment, is moving one of Bairstow or Stokes to open, and you drop Zach Crawley. But they've made it clear they're not dropping Zach. So 8 into 7 doesn't go. One person has to miss out in that top 7. And unfortunately, it's the guy who's the best gloveman, but probably the guy who doesn't suit the positive attitude the most, unfortunately, which sucks. And I think one of the Telegraph writers did a piece on it. It's been the age-old issue. Do you pick your best gloveman or your best batter in that number 7 role, or your wicket-keeping slot, if you've got a debate between the two? I've always leaned towards the best wicket-keeper. I feel like that's what it should be. And the thing I would say is that if they're going to go Johnny Bairstow, there is an argument that you could have had Stokes or him open if you want to really back the positive brand of cricket, which is something we'll probably get onto. But yeah, I think overall very harsh on Ben Folkes, who's done nothing wrong to be dropped.
I'm simply saying neutral here, and just
Like Switzerland,
just posing the questions. But Harrison, does Johnny Bairstow coming back not feel a bit 2016? Haven't we tried this experiment and it didn't work? And bringing him back as a keeper might not work second time round?
there is that element of risk to it. There is an element of risk to any selection, especially when you giving someone 2 roles like that, when it's not maybe their specialist set that they've excelled in their previous kind of stint in the side. But for Johnny, we saw the batting hands, what he did over the course of last year was simply superb. And we can only time will tell whether he does replicate similar forms that whilst also having the gloves. But England clearly believe, and Bairstow clearly believes he can fulfil that. And I don't blame them at the moment, because a lot of the decisions they've made have turned into winning ones under McCullum and Stokes.
So we've talked about the winning mentality there. Is it a case that Ben Folkes just doesn't quite have that pizzazz, as Rob mentioned, that star quality in terms of his batting? He's scored, he's been consistent, but he doesn't have the sort of baseball firing innings. Do you think that's why he's ultimately been left out, or is it just a case that Bairstow at the end of the day is the better man and he can keep, so that's why they've chosen him?
I think there was always an element that Ben Folkes kind of looked like the odd one out in the team, as you mentioned there. The style they're trying to play didn't necessarily suit, but fair play to him. He has been a key part of this England side over the last year, and he scored several important runs. But as I alluded to earlier, I just think they prefer Bairstow over him, and it was always ever going to be a one-man shootout for that spot on number 7. And unfortunately, Folkes has to be the one that makes way. It's elite level sport. This happens sometimes.
let's just you've both mentioned what Rob Key said there. Let's just read that out. He said it was a seriously tough decision to leave Ben Stokes out the squad. He has been excellent for England in the last year, but Johnny Bairstow is one of the best players in the world whose performances last summer epitomised what we are about. And I think you've both summed up why they've made that decision. I'm inclined to trust in the amazing cricket we've seen so far by Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum. So not as fiery as I was expecting, actually. But let's park that there for the moment and move on to another talking point, and that is James Anderson. Now, he's been named in this squad. However, as we know, he sustained an injury. Now, listening to the Tail Enders podcast, he seemed to be not worried by it. Does that mean we shouldn't be worried about it as England fans, or does that give us a worry? Rob, what happens if, God forbid, James Anderson gets injured?
James Anderson knows his body better than absolutely anybody else, as we all do. We all know our own bodies better than anyone else can tell us. Like, if he's saying that he's not worried, then we take him at his word. I mean, I think he's also come out. He was back at his old primary school in Burnley the other day, and he did some stuff with BBC Radio Lancashire, and he's done some stuff that's come on the BBC Sport website today, Friday, as we're recording this. Has kind of gone to play all 5 tests is probably unrealistic. He'd be happy with playing 3 out of 5 because he knows that the toll it takes on your body is, as a 41-year-old, I think he is now, it's hard enough as it is playing it when you're someone like Matthew Potts' age at 24, 25. You had an extra 15 years worth of cricket onto that. Like, I can't imagine how much it takes out of Jimmy to keep bowling these spells. So look, if I'm going to be honest, I don't think he should play the Ireland test. You've named plenty. Like, Potts has done absolutely nothing wrong in Div 2. He's been Durham's standout bowler. He's up there in the leading wicket tally. You've got Stuart Broad, you've got Mark Wood. Mark Wood also needs the game time. If he's going to be a viable option, Mark Wood, depending on when he comes back from the IPL, which is around now, and we're now going into T20 Blast, Durham don't have a lot of red ball games, if any, before the Ireland test starts. You've got Chris Wokes in there, who's looking to see if he can get back in the team after missing out last year. Ollie Robinson has been dismissing Steve Smith in the net, so he's got Marnus Labuschagne on strings. There's no need to play Jimmy if he's at any sort of, even if it's a 1% risk. And with all due respect to Ireland, we kind of know what Jimmy's going to rock up and do. Like, this isn't I can see the batting order is probably going to be set. We probably know what the top 7 is going to be. But in that bowling department, you've got 20 plus years of knowing what Jimmy's done. You don't need to roll him out in a one-off test against Ireland. It's the same argument for Stuart Broad. You don't need to play Stuart if you don't want to. Kind of, you've got the depth there in Robertson, Potts, Wood, Wokes. Those are 4 bowlers right there that could fill your 9, that could fill your 8 to 11. And we've got Jack Leach to fit in this side somehow as well. So, no, I don't think Jimmy should be playing that Ireland test match. I think there's a very good case for resting Stuart Broad as well. There's the argument that they need overs in their legs, but Broad's been playing for Notts. Jimmy was only meant to play 3 games for Lancashire and ironically played a 4th and got injured in the 4th game that he played. So that's even further proving my point that he shouldn't be playing as an unnecessary risk. But to the overall point, if Jimmy Anderson says he's not worried and he knows his body and he'll be ready to go and play at least 3 out of 5 tests, he'll want to play all 5. And I think England will want to get as many tests as they can out of him. But ultimately, we go off what Jimmy says, as it kind of should be, unless the medical team step in and go, actually, no, this guy's at serious risk of injuring himself. We trust Jimmy. We've trusted him for so long. Let's carry on doing it.
Trust in the go. I like how you said, with all due respect to Ireland, and then just completely demolish them. Let's move on. Because obviously we are trusting in Jimmy Anderson, and I think he will be fine, as you said. Another contentious topic, I tell you, this squad is full of them. And Zach Crawley. Now, there's been a few quotes flying around about how he doesn't listen to social media criticism. The team trusts him. We know that he will be opening. But as an England fan, when we've seen him, get out so much, is it right to see him open? Is it time to give someone else a go in the Ashes, Harrison?
There's always going to be that question mark over him, especially over what we've seen. The way I viewed it in the coming months, like Keaton Jennings has probably been the closest to him in terms of being a direct replacement at the top of the order, but I think unfortunately he got injured at the wrong time for himself. And that game just a few weeks ago has kind of ruled him out of any sort of selection. But in terms of Zach, we know what he can do. We've seen his big scores, and also there is part of the low scores, but he has this season, this summer in the county championship, put together, I think it was a big 170 in one game, and he's got a couple of other half centuries to go with it, including one against Hampshire last week. So he's not someone completely out of form in terms of the domestic stuff. I think it's probably been his best CC performance in the build up to a test summer as such since he got into the team back in 2020. But you never know what you're exactly going to get, but you can see why England continue to back him. But if he then does continue to fail this summer and Jennings keeps scoring the runs once he's back fit, then I think that the calls for change will probably get too loud and England will eventually make the change because you can't keep going with someone who, if he can underperforms as consistently has done and doesn't make those odd big scores to keep him in the team.
The fact you said that this is kind of his best county championship performance says a lot, and also says a lot in both ways. Yes, this is the best we've seen him in county championship cricket, and also that is very worrying for a guy who's been in the test side for the best part of the last 2 years. And I know, Harrison, your reasoning for not moving Stokes or Bairstow up the order is because they haven't batted that high. We forget that Zach Crawley started out in his test team as number 4. Started out as a number 4, moved up to 3, and then has been moved up to open. Ollie Pope was a 4, he's batted at 6, and has been moved up to number 3. So, look, before I get into Zach as in his form, I think he's completely right to go at people saying, he's completely right not to be on social media. Kind of, it's his own personal choice. I don't understand people giving him backlash for that. Everyone makes a conscious choice whether you want to be on social media or not. He's made the choice not to be. He should not be getting stick for that. If you're giving him stick, look yourself in the mirror. That's what I'll say on that. Zach, the batter, there are too many low scores, and this is in Div 1. I know, obviously, there are some very good bowling attacks in Div 1. There are also some lower attacks in Div 1, and he's going to be going up against Pat Cummins, Mitch Stark, he's going to have Nathan Lyon. This is the best Aussie attack. That Josh Hazlewood, if he's fit, potentially, this is going to be a very good Australian seam attack that he's going to come and be playing. I also have concerns over Ben Duckett in English conditions. I don't think Duckett is the second best opener we have, but the thing that Stokes and McCullum have said, we're not picking purely off stats. We're picking off, which is what I think some people are still maybe not quite understanding yet as to why Zach keeps getting picked. He fits that aggression, he fits that mentality, even though the numbers won't back up. For instance, Dan Lawrence fits the same thing. Lawrence has scored 100 in the opening round of the county championship. He's not done an awful lot since. He was out for 20 and he was out for 30 and 16 last week. I'm not sure what he's got this week so far if he's batted. But, Dan Lawrence is another one that hasn't, lit the world on fire, but yet is in that squad. Ollie Pope he's not hit the highs that we thought. Bairstow hasn't hit the highs yet, although he is coming off the back of a really, really, really bad injury. So Keaton Jennings would have been my pick. If Keaton was fit, I'd have had him in over Zach Crawley. I know Jennings has failed in the past in English conditions, but he does seem one of those rejuvenated. Alex Leach probably can't come back this soon after he was dropped not even 6 months ago, but he has looked better playing in a more aggressive style. I think his strike rate so far is sitting around 73 in the county championship so far this year, which when you think about how he was as an England opener, he was very slow. It will continue to be the problem until, I don't know, I want to say maybe 10 years from now, this England opener issue. We were so blessed to have Strauss and Cook for so long that the fall off was going to be harsh. It has been, then some more. We're only going to keep going through it until that next sort of person comes along who's really kind of, yes, this is going to be a test opener, which, to be quite honest, we have not had in a while. The last one was probably Hasib Hamid, and look how that one has turned out. So, yeah, the opening problem is going to be an issue for the next 2 to 3 years, but you just got to hope that the way that Stokes and McCullum want to play the brand of cricket that they do means it can bring the best out of Crawley and Duckett.
I think it's interesting that we've previewed the squad a bit now, and we keep talking about the decisions that they've made and the contentious decisions that they've made. And I think it's all well and good for us to sit here as three cricket fans discussing why Stokes and McCullum have made the decisions that they have, but they seem to be sticking by these players, being loyal to them, giving them a chance, giving them several chances, not listening to all the outside noise. And I think that's something we've not seen in England for a while. Harrison, do you think we've talked about Zach and the opening problem, Rob's touched on it there, but do you think any of what we're saying as fans in regard to this Bazball project actually matters? Because it seems like they've got, it doesn't matter what the media noise is, it doesn't matter how fans are reacting on social media, they're going to play the brand of cricket that they want. Are you a fan of this sort of mentality? What do you think about it? And how do you see it going forward?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I think in terms of the first thing, the fan noise and media noise does not seem to have a similar effect as what it has done under previous regimes. They seem so set on that mentality of positive attacking cricket, and they will just stick by that the whole way. I guess the interesting thing with that is if they do go on a bad run at some point, how do they fare then? Do they stick by it in terms of their loyalty to players and then the actual philosophy behind it all? But that is something we'll only find out in due course if it does happen. But in terms of, like you mentioned at the start there, about how they give players longer time in the side as such, I think it's just so much better for the players themselves. They know they've got that loyalty, they've got that security of their role where they're not constantly under pressure to perform and get the runs, which can inhibit performances such like that. And I think that will just help anyone at the top level of their games. But just as well, I want to add one thing to what Rob said about social media and Zach not saying he doesn't listen to people on it. I think it's got to the stage with Crawley where if he does anything, it's met with a massive backlash by certain quarters of the fan base and whatnot. And it seems a bit ridiculous. And some people kind of forgotten what being a fan does mean at times. But I mean, I find it hard to criticise Bazball at the moment. We've lost 2 tests out of 12. We've kind of hit new heights we didn't seem possible at this time last year. So we'll go with it for now and we'll see how the Ashes pans out. But for now, it's keep doing what they're doing and don't listen to the outside noise.
Trust in Bazball. I think we should take that sentiment through the Ashes series and through the summer that we're going to see. Just quickly before we move on, Ollie Pope has been named as vice captain. Rob, his appointment as that, hope for the future, because I think last year they were a bit unsure about who their vice captain would be.
Well, it seems to be a little bit of council leadership of, like, obviously Jimmy and Broad were there, so those guys are obviously going to have a huge voice. They've got the most experience. Joe Root, obviously, he's previous Test captain, so he's going to have something to say. He's been there, kind of done that. And Johnny Bairstow was there as well, who does a kind of had leadership by council during that. It was opening year of Bazball kind of thing. You just leaned on everyone that was there. And also, I think testament to Ollie Pope, because there was, I've been vocal about this in the past. There was probably a spot 2 years ago, and he's had time out the Test team. He lost his Test spot, he's lost his Test spot to Dan Lawrence, and he's missed out to some other players in that middle order as well. He kind of had to. I think there might have been a period where Joss kind of took his spot for a bit. So Pope has had to. He's been, he was the golden boy. Came in, had the success in South Africa, then kind of dropped off a cliff, had to sit his time out, go back to Surrey, work on his game, then be brought back, and kind of it's been real testament to him that he's now worked his way back up and is now been appointed as a Test vice captain. I think, yes, it definitely is one for the future. That future could be coming sooner than we all think. So, it might not be like 4 or 5 years from now. We could be looking at 12, 18, 24 months, depending on Ben Stokes' health. So, very well done to Ollie Pope.
Segue segue from the men's Ashes to the women's Ashes because that is also coming up. There's been a lot of joint marketing. Obviously, we don't know about the squad for that yet. We will in due course, and when we do, we will discuss it here on the channel. Harrison, in terms of the marketing, the men's and the women's, there's been a lot of social media campaigns putting them together, very much marketing this as an Ashes summer for both the men's and the women's, trying to combine them, trying to create a stronger fan base. How good has that been to see?
It's been exceptional to see. For too long, we've kind of considered the men's and women's games as separate products, and whilst they are still to a degree, you've got to treat them as that. When you've got something like this happening in your own backyard in one summer, you need to try and market it together to use the men's game in support of the women's game and get the crowds to the women's game that we want to see in the future. I mean, Somerset last week have announced increased capacity for their T20 in the women's Ashes against Australia, which is just fantastic to see that demand there for people to go out and watch women's cricket, which several years ago would not have kind of been there in that sense. But it's what more organisations, sports teams, competitions around the world need to do, and it's a really good thing from the ECB.
Definitely, and as I say, we will delve more into the women's Ashes when we get those squads. It looks to be a very competitive series there again, because England have gone through a bit of a transitional phase. Let's move on to our next topic then. I feel like we could talk about the Ashes for days, but we're not going to. And we're going to talk about some controversy in the county championship from last week, involving none other than my team, Lancashire, and Alex Duffell's beloved team, Somerset. Now, when he was here, I was going to talk to him and have it out with him about their draw that happened. However, he's not here, so I get to just take the floor on this. And I am actually going to be quite reasonable and nuanced and say that game was probably destined for a draw. And you can't sit there and blame Somerset for batting out the draw. Sometimes county championship is going to be boring and just go for a draw. Not everything is going to be Bazball. But Harrison, do Somerset hate Bazball after that match?
I mean, it's tough to tell because we saw the match unfold, and to someone who wasn't watching the game and just looking at the score and enjoying the runs Rue was scoring for my fantasy team, I was quite enjoying it. But it got to a stage where you looked at it and you were a bit like, Somerset have got a big lead here. We're kind of at a stage on day 4 where they maybe could declare and just kind of throw a wild card move and try and bowl Lancashire out. Although looking at on that pitch, it wouldn't happen. But then you look at the reports that come out, Craig Overton on Twitter saying Somerset offered Lancashire some sort of proposals to try and kind of force a result in the game. And
just can I jump in on that? I want to ask your thoughts on that, on the idea that captains are going into opposition dressing rooms on day 3 and going, "Oh, hi mate, can we give each other a game plan and then shake on it and let's all be friends?"
It's happened already. It happened before that game. Shot horror involved Durham.
How do you know all this about Durham, Rob?
Maybe because I'm flipping work there, mate. But yeah, Worcestershire were up at Durham a couple rounds ago, and Durham had racked up 400 plus on the opening couple of days. It'd been a little bit rain affected. I think we lost most of the afternoon of day 2 due to rain, and Worcestershire were kind of plodding along quite nicely. They were sitting basically around 120 behind, with about an hour or half an hour to go on day 3, and they couldn't get any more bonus points. They declared when they were behind. I think they were about 86 behind. So Durham had to go out. They lost both openers, but came back early on day 4, whacked it around a little bit, got the declaration in for an over before lunch, and then bowled Worcestershire out the remaining time in day 4 to win the game. Yes, that's good because that's some stuff I can't say about what Brian Campbell thinks of draws. But Worcestershire, I don't think Durham went to Worcestershire and offered that. I think Worcestershire kind of did it out of their own good to try and get a game, to try and get a result, because otherwise that was going to head to a draw. I think it is on a county-by-county basis. I don't think it's something you can force. Obviously, the ECB and Stokes have made that they want to see results. They want to see positive cricket. It's all well and good saying that. It's up to the counties if they want to enforce it or not. So I give Worcestershire credit for doing so. I also don't blame Somerset for not. It's at every county's choice.
But just on that point, on the thing of these people of captains setting up games, I wonder. Oh my God, there's light! Wow. Although this is what happens when you record when it's getting dark. Harrison, on those packs, it sort of feels like a fact. It almost feels like setting it up, and I don't know how that sits with you, but for me, it doesn't feel right. Like I get both teams want a result, but sometimes county championship games are going to have to draw, or they are.
Definitely, I think the draw is, especially in this form of cricket, is just a part of the game. It's as common as a win and loss in many ways sometimes. But something I've kind of thought about this summer, and that game Rob mentioned kind of triggered it in my mind, was the draw being reduced to 5 points per side. Some teams, in a way, kind of just accepting that maybe a draw isn't so beneficial sometimes, and they'd rather go for the win and just take the punt. If they take the loss, going to miss out on a few points and give the oppo some more. But you're going to get draws. I think that Worcestershire one did stand out, but it backfired. But you can't blame them for trying to put throw down.
Brett D'Oliveira was going to bat Jack Haynes was going to bat the entirety of day 4. From watching it, he was not getting out. Jack Haynes was going to bat the entirety of day 4 if Worcestershire did not declare. So that was going to end up in a very boring draw.
But boring draws are, I suppose.
I get it. Harrison pointed it perfectly. It's part of the game. It's going to happen. You cannot stop it. And it's why I say county by county basis. ECB, Ben Stokes and Brendan McCullum can all say, we want positive cricket, we want to see results. And counties can take that and they can run with it or they can leave it. It depends on what the coach thinks, what the captain thinks, and what some of it is weather dependent. Some of it is very weather dependent because cricket's a weather dependent sport.
Really?
You're going to have to accept it as kind of as a natural evil. It is going to happen at some point. It's just, is there an argument? This is stating the very obvious. There's an argument for Somerset declaring to try and get Lancashire to bowl Lancashire out. There's also an argument to give their bowlers some rest.
Definitely,
it doesn't. And I think to take that game, there were no more bonus points available. No more bonus points were going to be made available. So what is the point? You weren't really going to get result on that pitch. James Rue was playing some fantastic shots. It's experience for him. He's only 19, playing his 4th, 5th, 6th first class game. Like, I don't get why people are so up in arms about it. I get why you are, and I get why Alex is, because you're fans, you're invested in it. But from an outsider point of view, you kind of just have to. Would we've had this argument 12 months ago if Bazball had not happened? I don't think we do. I don't think we do. It is purely because, for me, it is because Bazball has put it into the spotlight.
I mean, I think we would have this argument 12 months ago, and I think it's the nature of county championship cricket is that this is going to happen. But I do think what doesn't sit right with me is the fact that just the idea that halfway through a game, could you imagine if 45 minutes through a football game, the captains came together and went, "Oh well,
you can't use."
I can and I am. And I'm
you can't.
Let me finish.
Here's plastic.
Yes, I'm a plastic fan. Yes, I don't understand football, but the anecdote still stands. It's just the idea of these captains coming together and deciding.
Surely that should be applauded.
But why should that be applauded?
Because they want to get a result on. If what we're saying is that we want results to be played.
Yes, I want a result. But not when it's fixed by the captains the night before.
So what are you going to do in that situation? If Somerset are not declaring, what are you going to do to get a result?
For the draw, because county championship games are going to end in draws. Anyway, I think we're going round in circles. This is the most animated we've got. Let's bring it back. Let's all calm down. And by calm down, I mean me. Harrison, let's talk more about Division 1. Surrey are at the top, sitting pretty above Hampshire and Lancashire, but I'm not going to mention where Lancashire are. At this point in the season where we're at a break for the white ball, do you think Surrey are going to win the county championship?
It kind of has a bit of an inevitable feeling to it, even today when they're playing Kent, they're in a bit of a tough situation. 211 for 7, I think they were, still 67 behind Kent's first in total, and then they end up with a lead of around 80. Thanks to their low order, I think that's one of their biggest assets. Doesn't get talked about a lot. They're able to score runs all the way down the order to number 11. It helps them so much, and that combined with their top order prowess and power in the bowling attack just makes them such a formidable outfit. And no one has really looked like touching them so far. There's been a couple of minor scares like that one against Kent in some games, but nothing major that's seriously thought, oh, they might lose a game here or they might not win a game here. But they have just looked so dominant, and compared to, say, Lancashire as such, who've drawn every game, they don't seem to have that cutting edge for win, whereas Surrey seem to find a way every time to get a win, even if it requires a dominant bowling display on day 4 or some. Just something, it seems some teams can't do it, so it seems they can.
Definitely, it'll be interesting to see whether that, maybe you've just put the curse on them because you want Hampshire to win. Anyway,
I'm doing everything I can.
Yeah. Let's stick with Division 1, Harrison as well. Who's going to be in the fight for relegation? Definitely Northants down there. Kent as well, possibly. Maybe even Lancashire. I'm not making this sad.
I said at the start of the season, I said Kent and Middlesex, I believe, were the ones to go down. I think Kent have kind of showed all signs of being a relegation type team. The batting kind of was the one thing that held them up last year was their batting, whilst their bowling struggled, but the batting has capitulated. I think it's fair to say this season. But then you're looking at a couple of other sides. You've got Northants and Somerset are finding a way to draw games, and to be fair, I think they will do enough just because their batting and bowling is of a standard that is good enough for Division 1. But you're looking at Northants, and they seem to have gone downwards after their strong season last year that kept them up. I think finished 6th last season, but they had a bad end to the season that kind of carried over into 2023 in the start of this, and got bowled out for 56 by Hampshire. They after being bowled out by them a few weeks earlier for something around in the 60s, which I think is never a good sign for any side. But so kind of, and then Middlesex themselves kind of touch on that one other team I mentioned. They've been impressive in parts. They've won a game against Nottinghamshire at Law, so they chased 240 in about 40, 50 overs, can't remember that number, which was kind of a real, going back to that conversation, kind of an element of basketball creeping into the county championship with that win. But they've shown parts when they're struggling against Somerset. I believe they're following on in that game, which is never as well a good sign, and they're going to be scrapping down there as well.
Definitely, it will be interesting to see, won't it? Now, the reason I've talked to Harrison so much about Division 1 is because I know a certain man might want to take the floor on Division 2 and talk about Durham, because they are front runners, aren't they? And it's been quite interesting to watch the transformation that has gone on in this side compared to last year. Rob, as someone who is, I feel like we said this off air, but is someone who seems more of a Durham fan than a Hampshire fan. How do you sum up what you've seen in the opening round of the county championship from Durham?
Baseball Mark 2. No word of a joke. It is Baseball Mark 2. Durham fans, if you listen to this, you'll remember Scott Borthwick and James Franklin having a massive row on the side of the pitch in one of the games, and kind of everyone could see it, and you could see it in the crowd attendances, you could see it in the players on the field. The club was not a very nice place to be. And Ryan Campbell apparently has got a magic wand, because he's come in and in the space of 4 months has, honestly, I said for our preview at the start of the season, everything that Ryan Campbell is saying was music to Durham fans' ears, and the players are carrying out on the pitch. There's only one question in their minds when they come back into the dressing room and when they're out on the pitch: how do they win the game? They're in a very good position at the minute. They've got Gloucestershire 9 down. They picked up all but 1 batting points in their first innings. They're only 5 runs away from getting the max. They've picked up the maximum bowling points. They are in a very good position. Potentially, they could force Gloucestershire to follow on tomorrow. The whole atmosphere has completely changed, and it helps when the recruitment. Well, Harrison mentioned Kent's batting has fallen off the cliff. Maybe they shouldn't have let their best batter keeper leave over the winter. Just that would just be
right there.
That would be ideal, but Kent's loss is Durham's gain. Ollie Robinson's been in very good form with the gloves, Alex Lees is as I kind of alluded to earlier, he's playing a bit more aggressively, which seems to suit. So I remember against Yorkshire last week, he got to like 38. He got to like 31 off 17 at the start of the second innings. So like, where was this in England colours? I think you see Graham Clark getting his second first-class entry in 6 years. They're getting contributions from everyone. David Bellingham hasn't been at his best since probably the opening round of the season so far. Maybe that second is against Worcestershire where he was able to smack an 86. But Graham Clark has stepped up with the bat. Paul Coughlin has stepped up with the bat. Brian Clark, before he went down with injury, has stepped up with the bat, got his maiden first-class entry. He stepped in with some 50s. Baz Delayed is now scoring runs and getting wickets. Matthew Potts, as I alluded to earlier, is leading that bowling attack. Ben Rain is still taking wickets and still getting Marnus Labuschagne out like he's his bunny. The whole mindset, Scott Borthwick also touched on this on the following on podcast with TalkSport earlier this week after the Yorkshire game. The whole mindset is flipped. And I think we said it was, we alluded to it as test fans in the test side, how much just a simple mindset flip can change. It really has done the same at Durham. They're similar personnel. There are some changes, but you think about it, they lost Chris Rushworth over the winter. One of the leading wicket takers in county cricket, and Durham have just kind of gone, all right, we'll just carry on without you. Like, they've kind of carried on without him as if nothing's happened. So this, the period over the summer, the test summer is going to be interesting because Potts will be missing for a fair chunk of it, if not all of it. Whether he's his 12th man or if he's playing. If he's 12th man, he has said he's not going to stick around to be 12th man, so maybe Durham can get him back. But yeah, they're more than a win clear at the top of Div 2 already. They're looking good against Gloucestershire, and I'm kind of selfishly counting down the days until mathematically Durham can get promoted to Division 1 again. It's a really positive atmosphere, and you've seen that with results on the pitch.
And I like your enthusiasm, and it's nice to see. But that's enough of that.
I mean, Sussex in a very good position as well. Sussex sitting second in the table at the minute. I think this is the last game of Steve Smith's loan spell before the Ashes. Ollie Robinson has been off to a really good start with the ball. Kind of trying to think. Yorkshire are really struggling. Obviously they struggle.
I'm saying Division 3 for Yorkshire.
Whether you want to say they bottled against Leicestershire, I think you give more credit to Leicestershire. In that case, that's a phenomenal run chase by them. It wasn't helped. They got washed out after 2 days against Gloucestershire with no chance of a result. They were on the wrong end of a nail biter last week against Durham. If they are able to dismiss Bryden Carr's first ball, they're on the right end of all the positive, remarks that Durham got last week. So they have struggled a little bit. They've got better so bad. They are missing Joe Root, who's been bench warming for the Royals in the IPL. Harry Brooks been missing as well. So they are missing some players. Shah Massoud was only available last week for his first game as captain. They've had some overseas put out as well. But, I think that's a real surprise that they're kind of where they are. But we said it earlier, cricket being a rain-affected sport, then they've kind of come out the wrong side of that. And you look at the rest of Glamorgan have shown fits and spurts. They've shown they can be really good, but they've also shown they can be quite poor. Leicestershire, since that opening round, have kind of faltered a little bit. They haven't really lived up to that kind of historic result, which I guess it's hard to do so when it's historic, but they've struggled to kind of carry on. Derbyshire, their batting is not great. Worcestershire's batting is not great either. I mean, you're kind of looking, I think, at this rate, everyone's kind of looking at Durham as you're not really going to catch them because they're not willing to be as aggressive or for whatever it may be. Maybe it could be as simple as Durham squad is just the best in Division 2. When you look at the overall from top to bottom, you've got two international openers. You've got guys who want. You've got Bellingham who wants to play for South Africa. You've got Ollie Robinson who's been on Lions tours. There's quality throughout, and then it kind of is a race for that second spot to go up alongside them at this rate, which Sussex seem to be in prime position for. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. I think this break is coming a good time for most of these sides in Div 2 to restock, reassess. You'll have players that don't play white balls, they'll drop out, they're able to go away, work on the game. You'll have white ball players who are coming in to rejuvenate the sides. So, I think this break is coming at the right time for a lot of Div 2 clubs.
And it is a long season ahead, definitely. I think it's interesting as well. You touch on Sussex there, who also have had a bit of a reset and a rebuild. Interesting to see those doing well. It's shaping up nicely for the rest of the season. And something else that's going to be shaping up tomorrow. We're recording this on Friday, the 19th of May, and we are blasting off tomorrow because the Vitality Blast is back. One of the best T20 competitions in the world. Harrison, as the only Hampshire fan on this podcast now.
You what?
I'm winding you up.
Of course you are.
Harrison, you obviously won last year.
Yep.
In
I wonder who that was again.
Yes.
I wonder who that was. Can you
Lancashire.
remember what it was as well, Kagi? Can you remember the fact that we won off a no ball?
Yes,
Which gave
I
you
was
one.
there. I watched the fireworks go off. I had the hope. All right.
It gave you just to reiterate. It gave you 1 off 1 to win.
All right. Yeah.
And you off a free hit, and Nathan Ellis still produced the goods.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would say that I had a great finals day up until about the last half an hour, and now that's erased from my memory. Anyway, Hampshire did win, apparently. Do you think they can do it again, Harrison, this year?
Yes.
Right, that's the end of that. Move on.
They've basically got the same squad as last year. Ben McDermott and Nathan Ellis back again as overseas. Nathan Ellis has really kicked on, getting more consistent appearances in the IPL this year for Punjab Kings and has taken several wickets and been a key cog for them, albeit they were eliminated today after losing to Rajasthan Royals. But you look at that, he's you would say should be playing for Australia, but he hasn't quite had those regular opportunities. But you got James Vink, top of the order, top run scorer in the whole blast last summer. Got other players like James Fuller, who's really kicked on championship-wise again this summer. And you wouldn't count against him doing so in the white ball stuff. And just look through the order. Tom Prest growing, more years, more experience. You back him to continue performing. Everywhere you just look at the Hampshire side and you think it's very strong, it's consistent. They can please just avoid losing their first 3 or 4 games. It would make life so much easier instead of having to win like their last 6 in a row again. But
just to get out of the group.
Yeah, just to get out of the group because they've done the last 2 years running and it's far too stressful.
Well, it's worked. We've got to final days on both occasions, but
yeah, but just avoid that for everyone, the Hampshire fans' health. But in terms of the actual side, they stock up really well when you look at them on paper. It's a very strong T20 side, but saying that, there's a lot kind of floating around. You look at Warwickshire, that one club catches my name this year. They've got Glenn Maxwell overseas. Paul Sterling's also there for a short while at the start. Former Lancashire overseas Glenn Maxwell that is. But you look at Warwickshire, they're gonna have Mo Rinaldi as well once he's back from the IPL.
And he's also rejoined from Worcestershire at the end of the last season.
Yeah, Ed Barnard will play for them. He also comes from Worcestershire. They have lost Adam Hose, which says a bit of a loss, but they are stacked batting wise.
I'm looking forward to seeing Dan Mousley. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I'm sorry if it's wrong.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to seeing him play. He looks to be a really good player. I think Hampshire, you mentioned there that I'm slightly worried that doesn't look like we're going to have Brad Wheel to start the campaign. And we might be missing him for the entire campaign. As someone who was a key part of that, he was a key part of that bowling attack at points last year. So you're gonna have to find someone to replace him. You guys thought I was going to say something else, then, didn't you?
No, it's Kagi making an awful joke.
You didn't hear that, but I made a terrible pun about Brad Wheel's last name, and I'm going to gloss over it and pretend it didn't happen.
Of course you did. That's the only slight concern for me to start the year is who's going to fill that Brad Wheel kind of role, because Kyle Abbott and Mohammed Abbas won't be playing white ball cricket. Keith Barker doesn't play white ball cricket, so it looks like it's going to be one of the young guys. Maybe Brad Curry's going to have to step. Scott Curry. It looks like it might have to be Scott Curry to step up and take a bigger role.
We always get Brad Curry from Sussex if we want, but
just fancy completing a pair of brothers to play for Hampshire. That's what it is.
Yeah.
I think. I mean, you two. They're talking. That's not a word. Talked about Hampshire there, and Warwickshire as well. And I think there are some seriously strong sides in this Vitality Blast this year. I'm gonna give a bit of Lancashire prop now because I think we have. Excuse me, we've been recording for a long time, and I have not yet gone on one of my Lancashire rants. However, I do think our greatest chance of silverware this year is in the Vitality Blast, or the one
Well,
day.
it's not the county championship.
Yeah, I know now. So, but I mean, I hope this is my plea to Lancashire. If anyone at Lancashire, I don't know, Lancashire thing is watching this, please don't make me watch you agonizingly lose another knockout game, having done so well in a group stage, right? Because I'm fed up, sick to death of watching them lose in semi-quarters and finals day. I'm hoping we can go one step further this year. Obviously, Colin de Grando and Daryl Mitchell as our overseas signings. You add to that Liam Livingston when he's back from the IPL, Joss Butler, Phil Salt. Talk about a gun batting order.
I was actually about to come to this. Your hopes do kind of rest on those. If those three come back, and also you mentioned Joss Butler there, he is also struggling for a bit of form at the minute.
Definitely.
He might decide to take some time off because he has got a busy end to this year. He's got some T20s and ODIs lined up before the World Cup. So maybe he takes some time off. But I think, yeah, I look at your top order. If you have everyone fit and available, your top order is very scary. And Daryl Mitchell is a very astute signing. It's just if you're going to have those guys available, which I suspect a few of them you might not.
What I would say, though, is I am confident that we have the depth in our squad to cover when those people leave. Now, you may say that these names are not well known, but the likes of
Keaton Jennings had a good blast tournament.
Keaton Jennings had a good blast. As soon as he's back from injury, he's going to be captaining the side. Stephen Croft is a gun. He consistently fires in the blast. He knows what he's doing. He loves it.
Someone clip that up for when he fails.
You've got young guns coming through like George Bell, who's looking a fantastic player in fantastic form as well. So I am confident that we have the power to cover over some of those cracks if those international players aren't there. Now, we touched on a lot of our sides naturally because we're quite biased. Rob, I think I know the answer to this question. So just briefly, do you think Durham are going to do well? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right. Okay. Anyone else? Any other sides at all? Maybe in the South group we haven't talked about that.
We haven't really talked. We've touched on Warwickshire North group or South group.
North. I suppose Surrey will be up there. They're always kind of up there every year. Quarterfinal defeat to Yorkshire last year, but I think they got Sunil Narayan back as an overseas for the Blast. They got Will Jacks.
You mentioned Yorkshire there. Yorkshire, I mean, they've got Johnny Bairstow for their first. I think they'll probably have him for the first 2 games before he's pulled aside by the ECB. So yeah, they could be another ones to watch. I think a lot kind of goes into previews, and sometimes, we've been victim of it. They could really go out the window because an unexpected team can get on a roll, and they just, they keep the good form going. Especially with the Blast, games going to be coming thick and fast. So I think ultimately we can talk all we want about star players and X, Y, Z, and like all these like good bowling players and etc. etc. Ultimately, it's going to be the teams that can get on a roll for me. It's going to be which teams can get on a roll the earliest. Who can string 2 or 3 games together? Who can win that 10 off 6 off the final over? Can you chase those runs? Can you defend that total? And if you can do that, you'll give your side more confidence to keep going on.
I'll tell you who's I think might be an underdog in the North group. I think watch out actually for Derbyshire. Because I actually think that whilst on paper they might not have the greatest side, they did quite well last year, as I remember it. Got to the quarterfinals, and I think
and then we're only on the wrong end of Somerset.
Yeah,
howitzer performance.
Absolutely. So I think maybe keep an eye on them. Leicestershire as well, rebuilding. We'll watch with bated breath. And I don't know about you, but I am really happy T20 Blast season is back because it is my favourite time of the year. And I love watching it, and I can't wait to be back at Old Trafford. I'm sure you two will be at Durham or Hampshire or watching.
I'm working half the games, mate, so I will be there.
Yeah, exactly. Our man on the ground. So let's move on then to, we mentioned at the top of the show talking about Jofra Archer. Now, since we've been gone, there's been a couple of news stories about how Jofra Archer may be offered a central contract with the Mumbai Indians to play with them all year round, and that would involve the ECB asking the Mumbai Indians for permission for him to play for England. Now, the direction of travel in cricket worldwide, I think it's fair to say, has been building up to this crescendo for a long time. Harrison, where do you stand on this? Does it sit well with you that Jofra Archer was, brought up in Sussex, brought through the ranks, learned his craft, and now he's going to be contracted to the Mumbai Indians all year round and not even play for England potentially?
It's a tough one. I can see both sides of the debate because the game is very much moving towards the franchise circuit as the main direction. And to be honest, you can't blame a lot of players in the sense of taking the money. It's money never seen before on the cricket. In terms of cricket, the sport itself, it's kind of money associated with football and American sports and stuff like that. And you can't blame players for taking that big paycheck. It's especially like the IPL. It's made so many careers and families' lives for the players and stuff. It's just fantastic to see. But at the same time, you wonder, like the traditionalist and like us fans, like the country is first priority. You want to see players playing for that. But in most other sports, you look at it and the country isn't really first priority, especially football. It's club football is the number one, and club fans don't exactly like seeing some players playing for international teams.
Football's the prime example. Clubs can refuse to release players because it's club first, country second.
That's the direction of travel. It certainly seems like.
I think it's been as Harrison said, it's been moving this way for a while, and we now have probably reached a tipping point where Jofra looks like, if the rumours are to be believed, he's going to be offered a multi-million-pound per year deal to play for Mumbai Indians. And you think the IPL has got bigger in recent years. I think it's due one more expansion. It's going to get longer in length as well. So you're going to have more games to be played, which some traditionalist fans are currently scrapping away on their keyboards going how it's the end of cricket, X, Y, Z. But I think Jofra is probably look, as we alluded to, the guy has barely stayed fit for the past 3 years. For him to take that deal is perfect. You play white ball cricket only, you get paid a handsome amount of money to do so. So you get to look after your body more. You're only playing one tournament on paper. You obviously be in England consideration if he can stay fit. But that is life-changing money for him. And this is a guy, teams in American sports are very reluctant to give elite players so much money if they're coming off the back of injury seasons, let alone a guy who's barely played the last 3 years. So for someone like Joff, I think that is that's amazing for him. I don't begrudge him if he takes that, because ultimately, as I alluded to, professional sport is a short enough career as it is, and for people who suffer with injuries, I guess it's highly unlikely in Joff's case, but in another player's case, they may never see that type of money again if they turn it down. So I get you having to. And look, cricket is not a sport where you can comfortably make a living out of. You see players at the Div 2 counties who do other part-time jobs or have got backgrounds in other jobs. Rugby is another prime example. Players are encouraged to have a backup plan in case it doesn't work out for them, so they can be financially viable off their playing career. I don't understand why cricket needs to be any different. I think that's still set in the elitist ways of, an old white man's club and you earn enough money. I think where the issue comes is if someone like Josh Butley gets offered that contract, then we have a serious issue, because that's the white ball skipper getting offered it. And let's not beat around the bush. If Joffrey gets offered that contract, Joss is going to be high on Royals' list.
On the list, definitely.
And this is where potentially you have to come in and say the ECB have to take maybe a drastic measure of going, if you take that deal, we won't consider you for international selection. And that's where the real power struggle, and that's where it could get really ugly. We've just had this recently. Jason Roy has been offered a deal to go to the American T20 league that's starting up in a couple of years and kind of be the face of it. And I think he only turned it down because he knows he's still with a chance of a World Cup slot.
Yeah.
I think if they offer him a little bit more money next year, or even the same deal, but next year, I think he takes it. So we have reached that point. We've now gone over the proverbial, if you're looking at like a seesaw or tipping scales, we have now tipped over to the franchises have got the power. And you can blame the ECB, blah, 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 but ultimately now there's no point. You're not going to get anything done by just shouting at the ECB on Twitter. The ECB now have to somehow become a competent organization again and go, right, how are we going to manage this? How are we going to deal with this if it crops up? Because if journalists are already reporting it as rumours, there's no smoke. There's no smoke without fire. There's definitely been they've got sources probably close to Jofra or in the Mumbai Indians camp that are giving them that information. So
it's on its way.
Yeah, it's on its way. The ECB have now got to find a way to deal with it.
And it will be interesting to see in the years to come. One final thing on this, Harrison. If it is a franchise cricket around the world, where does England sit in this system? Where does the English domestic system sit in this system? You know, you've got the IPL, you've got the BBL, you've got the SA20, you've got the Major League Cricket in America. But England doesn't have that same privately owned franchise league. Do you think we'll see Hollywood open to franchise investment? Where do you see this going for England? Because I can't see at the moment how it slots into that system.
England need to find a way to open up a tournament to investment from private companies like they have with the IPL and other stuff. I think that's kind of the stuff behind all the rumours about the 100 being changed to whatever it may end up, or if it stays in its current form, they're going to try and open it up to that private investment, because we've fallen so far behind as a country as it is, despite playing the first ever T20 game, however many years ago, I think 20 years ago or whatever it was now. We played the first ever T20 game, but we are somehow, in terms of like the big three, we are right at the back and a long way back behind India and Australia, just because we've let it slide. We haven't kind of opened up those opportunities they have in India and Australia, and we are now trying to, the 100 was obviously, they're trying to catch up, and it has worked and it hasn't worked. That's another whole different debate for another day, but they need to find a way to open up private investment, because else they'll just slip further away. They will lose players to other tournaments, like they've been threatened with the one in America that's in July, that you lose players for the Blast. It's just as simple as that. They need to find a way, because the way the landscape is changing rapidly, the ECB have to find a way to catch up before they slip off the map completely.
We are playing catch up, and it's a matter of time, and it'll be interesting to see how it develops in the next few years, and I'm sure we will continue to talk about it. Now it's time for Ask TCM. Yay! It's the part of the show where you lot give us your questions and we have a chance at answering them. And first up today is a bit of a curveball. It comes from Theodore Bagwell on Twitter. What do you think about the pedestrianisation of Norwich City Centre? I'll be honest, I'm dead against it. Harrison, your thoughts?
Well, in a quiz I did today at uni, Norwich was the correct answer for one, and it helped us win the quiz, so I am fully behind this statement.
Okay. Rob, any thoughts?
I abstain because I know absolutely nothing about Norwich apart from their football club are staying in the Championship for another season.
There we go. Right. Well, let's move on from that, although that might be my favourite question that's ever been submitted. This is from our good old friend Ben, who's not with us today. He says, has there ever been an English bowler who's had a better start to his international career than Ollie Robinson? Harrison?
From the top of my head, no, really. I think he's kind of just come on the scene and fitted in like a duck to water in many ways. He just takes wickets for fun. He's doing it in the CC in the last few weeks. Dismissing Marnus Labuschagne this week, it just looks easy to him, and he's overcome some fitness issues and now looks like in the mould for proper like test fast bowler. And his height, just every asset he has is so valuable to him and makes him such a threatening asset to any side.
Definitely, and it'll be great to see how he goes this summer. Let's move on to another one now. And Rob, this one comes from Bobo Piers. He asks, might it be worth considering a leechless Ashes side since the Ashes are so early in the year. We haven't really seen any domination by spinners in the county championship, and we may be without Stokes's bowling. What do you make of that?
I'd question the lack of domination, but that again is very from a Durham point of view, because I know 2 Durham spinners have taken 5ers so far. I don't know about many others. I saw Leach has gone well against. Is he playing Middlesex this week?
Yeah, he took 2 for 22.
So he's picked up some wickets there. I think that question will be asked in team meetings at some point. I think it definitely will be considered whether we go ahead, whether Stokes and McCullum go ahead. The only issue if you don't go with Jack Leach is that you're relying on Joe Root to provide any spin, and Root is a good part-timer. If you're having to, I'll set the scene. Jack Leach isn't picked. Maybe you go Anderson, Broad, Potts, Robinson as your 4 quicks. Pitch on day 2, Nathan Lyon is finding turn left, right, and centre. England are in deep shit at that point.
Yeah, get Robbo to bring out his off spin. That's the only answer.
We need Tom Sibley back just for his.
That's my point. I think England will, and also I don't think this should be understated. Jack Leach is also a handy bat. Like he's not a bunny down the order. He can more than hold a bat, and he can provide some valuable lower order scoring. Particularly considering the fact Ollie Robinson was meant to be a good all rounder at Test level, who still hasn't shown anything with the bat so far. So I don't think you can really underestimate Leach's stat in that department. You also consider, if you're not picking Leach, Matt Parkinson has fallen off the face of the earth. Rehan Ahmed is too young to be trusted to lead a spin bowling attack in an Ashes series. The guy only made his Test debut 5 months ago. So yes, it will be considered. No, I don't think it will happen.
Okay, and finally, this one comes from Matthew, and it's a bit of a self-deprecating question.
I know which one this is.
Ask me, why do I think it's acceptable to choose a team with only 10 players? He's referencing when we all
can't do maths.
Selected 11s, and do you know what? I did it because I think England can win the Ashes with 10 players. Right, that concludes TCM Howzat for there. You've had a bumper episode. You've missed us, but we've been here for a long time. What have we learned? Well, I like draws, Rob likes Durham, and the pedestrianisation of Norwich City Centre should not happen. It's been an absolute pleasure. My thanks to Rob and Harrison for joining us. If you've enjoyed the shambles, please do give us a like and a subscribe, and we will see you in the next one, hopefully much sooner than 5 weeks.